Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I am the chairperson for the third session of the second Culture and Strategies Forum for the Korean Peninsula and the North, which is themed around the Korea-Central Asia cooperation on culture. My name is Jung Sang-gi. I retired from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and currently am a professor of emeritus at Konkuk University. Northern region is an important strategic hub for regional defense and logistics. It's also the next generation emerging markets, an important energy and resource supplier, and it's also an important region for food security. There are a lot of Korean diasporas living in this region, so culturally they're close to Koreans as well. In that regard, Korea implemented its northern policy for the past 50 years. We've seen a lot of success and achievements in the political and diplomatic circle, but comparatively, we have not seen much progress on the culture side. Also, there was this sense that people only focused on spreading the Korean culture in a one-way direction. Culture is an important driver that facilitates the politics, diplomatics, and economics relations. Also, it's closely connected to the individuals and the national identity. So for the past 50 years, the Korean government worked hard to implement the Northern policy. But when it comes to the cultural cooperation, which lag a bit behind compared to politics and economics, what can we do going forward? In other words, when it comes to looking for the context with the North and searching for solidarity, what kind of concrete action plans can we come up with? And this session has been prepared to actually exchange ideas on this topic. I would like to briefly recap what was mentioned during the opening ceremony and the morning discussion. In the morning, we had many heads of embassies who came from Central Asia to share their presentations, and they all emphasized the importance of culture exchanges, not just culture exchanges on the tangible front, but also intangible cultures. And they also said that two-way interaction is important. As for the former UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, he delivered his keynote speech. During his keynote speech, he said that we need to move away from the diplomacy that was focused on the four major powers. We need to have an active communication with the northern region. And that requires two things. The mutual cooperation requires two things, which is first, being willingly inclusive of others' cultural diversity. Only then can we engage in true cooperation. Second is discussing solutions per agenda in a more specific and practical manner. So we need to do more than just words. So this sums up on what was discussed during the morning. And now I will introduce the speakers for the afternoon session. We have 3 keynote presentation speakers and 5 panelists. The 3 speakers are Mr. Seo Jung-kang, the Director General of World Taekwondo. Could you raise your hand, please? And please make sure that you give your hand after all the introduction has been done. And next we have Mr. Chung Tae-in, the former ambassador to Turkmenistan, and Mr. Lee Yong-gi, the CEO of EHL Bio. As for the panelists, we have Ms. Kang So-yeon, the director of KNN Nexon Foundation, as well as the professor of Department of Media and Image at Seoul Digital University, Mr. Kang Jin-seok, professor of HUFS, and Mr. Park Jong-ung, director of Korea Tourism Organization, Mr. Son Young-hoon, the director of Institute of Central Asian Studies at HUFS, and Mr. Oh Jin-seok, director at the Sports and Tourism Ministry of Republic of Korea. Please give them a big hand.
이어서 간단히 진행 요령을 설명하겠습니다.
I will briefly go over on how we will proceed. The presenters, you will be given 7 minutes each, and each panelist will be given 5 minutes for their comments. So the reason why I have my cell phone here is because I'm going to use a timer. I'm going to show with this paper that your time is up, because we also have the closing ceremony after the session, so we need to be on time. So please keep your time.
그리고 참고로
Also,
지금 이제 이 세션은
although
러시아어로
the session is being presented in Korean, it's going to be interpreted simultaneously in English and Russian. So please make sure you don't speak too fast, and please use short sentences. Otherwise, it doesn't matter how much you speak, it's not going to be interpreted.
잘 발표했다고 하셔야
So even if you're satisfied with your presentation, if you want your message to be delivered, because it's going to be live streamed on YouTube and it's going to be recorded and posted on YouTube, so make sure you don't speak too fast. With this, I will end the introduction and invite our first presenter, Mr. Seo Jung-gang.
네, 안녕하십니까.
Hello everyone. As introduced, I am Seo Jung-gang from World Taekwondo.
한반도-북방 문화전략
First of all, it is my honor to be presenting on Taekwondo at this forum.
시간 관계상
Due to time constraint,
발표 내용 중
I am going to skip some slides, and you may refer to the program booklet for more information
제가 오늘 발표할
in your own convenience. But what I'm going to be focusing on in my presentation is how we've been promoting closer ties with the northern countries using the sport of Taekwondo,
선도해 왔고
and what Taekwondo has been doing in this regard, and what we can do to further strengthen this role of Taekwondo in promoting relations with the northern countries.
저희 세계태권도연맹은 1973년에
World Taekwondo was established in 1973, so this is the only sporting organization of Taekwondo recognized by the IOC.
112개
And we have 212 member countries of World Taekwondo.
연맹들 중에서
And so we are actually one of the top sporting organization with the largest membership.
보시는 관점에서는
Some people may not know this very well, but Taekwondo is well spread across the country, and in terms of globalization and internationalization, we have a large global membership.
이런 부분들은
Let me skip the introductory slides. You may refer to the program proceedings.
를 하셨었는데
Our president delivered the congratulatory message in the morning,
세계태권도연맹 산하에는 5개
and we have the continental commissions. We have 212 member national commissions, and we have the continental unions. As you can see here, there are 5 of them.
1973년도에 7개국으로
In 1973, we started World Taekwondo with 7 countries, but as of 2022, we have 212 member nations.
저희가 주최하는 대회가
You can see that there are 23 competitions hosted by World Taekwondo. They include World Taekwondo Championships and Pumsal Championships and Grand Prix series and finals. So we have more than 20 international championships and games hosted by World Taekwondo.
그다음에 장애인 올림픽
And Taekwondo is included in the Olympic Games, Paralympic Games, and the continental multi-sporting events.
그 외에도
In addition, Taekwondo is included in international multi-events, including Summer Universiade.
정도로 대중화가
So Taekwondo has become very popular around the world.
현재 태권도와 올림픽과는 따로 떼서 볼 수 없을 정도로
The history of Taekwondo is very much related to the history of the Olympic Games. And since it was adopted as an official sporting game of the Olympics, it has gained even more popularities. And we had some crises in 2005, 2013, and 2016, but Up until 2018, Taekwondo has been a part of the Olympic Games.
이 표가 보여주는 건 왼쪽에
What it shows on the left-hand side is the IOC ranking
팀 수입을
in terms of marketing revenue distribution.
배분은 저 그룹을 어떤
There are
들 간에
5 different groups, and some may interpret this as the power ranking, but this table has not been updated, and World Taekwondo is part of Group D. But on the right-hand side,
가 되고 있는
you can see the
어떤 국제 연맹으로서의
influence or capabilities as an international organization in terms of justice and fairness and transparency. And by this standard, World Taekwondo is part of Group A2. It shows that we have a competitive edge compared to the other sporting organizations.
문역입니다.
So it is quite encouraging.
또 그 올림픽에서는
And at the Olympic Games, Taekwondo
처음
was competed. In 1988, it was a pilot sport, but starting from 1992 and Sydney Olympic Games, you can see that Taekwondo was an official game, and a total of 41 countries won gold medals.
보시면
Won medals. So the top countries are South Korea and China, and the other countries have not been able to win more than 2 medals. It means that all these countries are capable of winning any medal. Russia, Azerbaijan, Uzbekistan, and Kazakhstan are Central Asian and Eurasian countries that have won medals in Taekwondo. I mentioned that there was some crisis of Taekwondo being kicked out of the Olympic Games, but we were not. And we were able to maintain our presence in the Olympic Games, and we were able to expand the membership to 212 countries around the world thanks to these efforts. Along with triathlon, Taekwondo was the sport that was included in the Olympic Games at the latest. And so we have a short history. And we always pursued innovation. We introduced the electronic torso protectors and video judging, and many other changes were applied to Taekwondo. There was a reporter from New York Times, and this reporter ran an article where you can see that Taekwondo is actually providing opportunities for many countries who are not able to win any medals at the Olympics. So here the journalist said that Taekwondo is perhaps the most generous to the wealth of nations. And in many cases, Afghanistan and Niger and Gabon, Jordan, these countries won their first Olympic medals in Taekwondo. And Taekwondo has become a very popular sport in these countries. And also we take pride in that we're not only promoting the sport itself, but also we're trying to spread universal value that can be provided by sport. It was mentioned by our president in the morning. We try to create more value that goes beyond the limits of sport. So since 2016, we have been teaching Taekwondo to refugees around the world. And this has gained a lot of traction. And also we participate in various refugee assistance activities, and we've been recognized by the Olympic IOC and in Jordan, Rwanda, Turkey, France, and Switzerland. We have offered Taekwondo practice, and I'd like to show you a short video in Jordan where we ran Taekwondo classes in Jordan with refugee kids. And this was actually the first ever game or competition of Taekwondo. More than 200 refugee kids participated. And this was actually the first time that they came out of the refugee camp to participate in the competition. Please take a look at the video. I had to cut short because of time limit. But so as you can see in this video, you can see that there are many programs to help vulnerable members of the society. For instance, there's Hope School in Africa, more than 50 Hope schools, and this is where we teach Taekwondo, and we also teach Taekwondo to victims of sexual crimes and other victims of violence, and we get funded by other agencies. And we have Taekwondo Peace Corps that started in 2008. And here, these are northern countries marked in red. And in many northern countries, we send our Peace Corps members. Let me skip some of these slides. And we were able to appeal to a larger audience, and you might have seen this Taekwondo performance, demonstration performance, and World Taekwondo demonstration team was invited to many occasions. And as you saw, these demonstration performances are really dynamic and exciting. So these demonstrations were quite effective in spreading the sport. And on YouTube, you can find that there are many views on these videos. And in Pyongyang, we did performance twice already. And in Vatican City, we were actually the first demonstration performance that was watched by the Pope himself. And these occasions helped boost the image of Taekwondo around the world. And we also have the slogan, One World, One Taekwondo. This is promoted by World Taekwondo President. So we have ITF, which is led by North Korea. It is another international organization of Taekwondo, but since 2014, we have been working with ITF. This has sent a very positive message, and through the Pyeongchang Olympic Games and other occasions, we were able to demonstrate that Taekwondo is being used to spread the value of peace. We have also been given support from the government, and we were able to promote exchanges between the two Koreas while government-level exchanges were halted. And we have world champions aged over 60. This is possible in the sport of Taekwondo, where we have senior athletes who are competing actively in Taekwondo. And that is where we have the World Pumse Championships, where senior citizens can win medals. And you may refer to the map and the proceeding where we are playing our role. I'd like to give you some characteristics of Taekwondo in the northern countries. And many of these countries joined the World Taekwondo in 1992 and 1993 after the collapse of the Soviet Union. And before they joined World Taekwondo, they were influenced mainly by ITF, led by North Korea, or karate. So in some northern countries, they still have more presence of karate and ITF style Taekwondo. And some made quick transition to World Taekwondo style, but some others are not yet. And while the Taekwondo history in these countries is rather short, of more than about 30 years, but they are practicing Taekwondo in education, in schools, and also police and the military. It is all thanks to the efforts of the national organization and also the government's initiative. And I have a short video, 1 minute and 30 seconds. Can I play this? Okay. In 2019, in Uzbekistan, there was the Youth Championship, as our president mentioned in the morning. There was a surprise flash mob in 2019 in Uzbekistan. And it really shows how Taekwondo is popular in the northern region.
이것도
Okay, so that was a short video of the flash mob. I wasn't able to play the whole video, but
이 자리를 빌어서
in closing, what I would like to mention in my presentation is, as I mentioned before, in northern countries, there are national Society of Taekwondo, and they are working hard to spread Taekwondo in their respective countries. Now, in the future, when you're developing cultural cooperation strategies, I hope that you can utilize the Taekwondo networks. These are global networks.
그리고 이 북방과들 간에
And
교집합이 있으니까
we can consider Taekwondo as a common aspect of the northern countries. So we can link your programs with Taekwondo events so that we can bring together the northern countries and Central Asian countries by using Taekwondo.
구도적 교육적으로 같이
We're not only spreading the sport but also spreading the value of manner and other important values.
긴밀한 협조를
And diplomatic missions and other agencies can collaborate with us, World Taekwondo, to promote cooperation. There was a case in Uzbekistan and Azerbaijan when there is an Olympic medal won by these countries, then they get really interested and excited about Taekwondo. And a lot of foreigners equate Taekwondo with Korea because this is the representative martial art of Korea. And in their tobok or uniform, they would put their name written in Korean and with the Korean flag. So there's a lot of pride associated with Taekwondo, and I hope that you will take advantage of the global network of Taekwondo that we have. And I hope that companies and the government agencies will provide support for World Taekwondo going forward. Thank you for your attention.
강 국장님 감사합니다.
Thank you, Mr. Seo Jung-gang, for your presentation.
저희가 이 오늘 기조 발표에 집어넣은
We-
이유는
The reason why we put in Taekwondo as part of the keynote presentation is because when we talk about culture, there's sports, food, art, there are various different things, but as he mentioned during his presentation,
정착이 돼서
the thing that can work well in the smallest period of amount of time in a different culture, Taekwondo has become that sort of a sport. It's a sport that's loved by a lot of people, and it does create value in different cultures. And why was it able to succeed so well in such a short period of amount of time in northern countries?
다른 분야도
I think we can learn from the example of Taekwondo and do similar things with other cultural elements when we cooperate with the northern region.
해서 지금 태권도 사실
That's why we included Taekwondo as the first keynote presentation. And I gave extra time for the presentation. Thank you. Next, we will invite former Ambassador Jung Tae-in.
예, 정태인입니다.
Hello, as introduced, I am Jung Tae-in.
제가 최근에
Recently, I served as the ambassador to Turkmenistan, India, and I was in charge of Middle East and Africa when I worked in the foreign ministry. And during my work, I was able to learn new things, and those are the things I would like to discuss today in my presentation. Culture, including Taekwondo, can help us build solidarity, build that sense of community with others, and that's the foundation for all types of cooperation, I think. So I feel like we should have done roundtable session first and then do roundtable 2. But anyhow, when we talk about how can we promote cooperation with northern region, I think that the northern region, including the Korean Peninsula, was one to begin with. And now we're saying, we should try to find ways to cooperate. How should we strengthen? And I think the process is important. So to summarize, when we say northern region, including the Korean Peninsula, you can see this in a map. I will show this map on the slide.
역사 문화적으로
And culturally, historically, politically, economically, there were three major hubs: the Mediterranean in Europe, India, and China. And the region in between these hubs are the northern regions. And the commonality is that they use the Altai language. From Turkey to Korean Peninsula, people use the Altai languages. And they had this horseback archery culture. This horseback archery culture is not existent in India, Europe, or China, but this is available in the Eurasian region. So there are two elements that we share in this region. Actually, there are three that we share. And I think by using those three commonalities, we can unite this region and actually conquer this region. When we talk about individual countries of the northern regions, we cannot see the big picture, but throughout the past 1,000 years, Eurasian continent had played a big role in history. For instance, during the 11th century, the Seljuk Turks moved to the Middle East and occupied the Middle East, and that invited the Crusades as they clashed with Europe. And then a few hundred years later, the Mongolians appeared, and then the Ottoman Empire conquered and dominated the European region for 500 years. So after the Industrial Revolution, the world was centered around sea. But up until then, the Eurasian continent ruled the world. And in the process of moving to the Mediterranean, they also conquered India. So these nomads went to India and they got rid of Muslim and they propped up their own kingdoms and empires. They began from Samarkand, and Babur, the descendant of Timurid, established Mongolia. That was the end of 19th century, and they ruled India until the the British came into the picture. And the same goes for China. In the Chinese region, 2nd century, the 3rd century, the Mongolians went to China and established the Yuan dynasty after they destructed the Song dynasty. They traded via sea and via land. And that's sort of the former archetype of the One Belt, One Road initiative. In 17th, 18th century, in Manchuria, we saw the rise of the Manchurians. They established the Qing dynasty, and they expanded into the Central Asian region. So for the past 1,000 years before the Industrial Revolution, until the East conquered the West, the so-called northern region, the people in that region dominated the world. They connected and changed and ruled the world. They played a big geopolitical role. That could be the summary of my findings. Due to the Industrial Revolution and the advent of the Age of Discovery, they handed over their power to the West, and that faded away the era of the northern region. But after the fall of the former Soviet Union, we're now seeing the focus return to the Eurasian region because the states of former Soviet Union have become independent, and we're seeing new opportunities for reconnection.
발전적으로 나간다면은
So if these movements develop a bit further, the Central Asia located a bit below Russia and ranging up until Turkey, this entire Turkic region can enhance solidarity.
유라시아의 어떤
And with the addition of China, we can
형태까지 좀 상상해 볼
dream of building solidarity in Eurasia as a whole. I mean, that's the best case scenario if we are successful in terms of building our connection.
때 말씀드렸다시피
As I mentioned in the beginning of my presentation, the Korean Peninsula is also part of the northern region. They were one to begin with.
뭐 여러분들이 다 아시다시피
And as you all know, in the Korean Peninsula, we have Manchurian, Mongolian descendants. They settled in this region. They established the Goguryeo Baekje dynasty, and the Turkic nomads came to Shilla, and they were the ruling class. They were the Kims.
통일 신라가 망하고
And
고려로 넘어가면서
when the United Shilla became Goryeo, the
세력이
ruling class of Korea were the Kims of Gyeongju region.
우리 그 민족
As we can see from this history,
북방과
our ethnicity goes back to the northern region. We're closely connected. Culturally, I said that we all use Altai languages and we share the culture of horseback archery. And Korean has its roots in Altaic. This language root is something that we cannot deny. That shows that we're part of the northern region. And the horses and arrows and bows is also a culture shared in this region.
고구려의 그 수렵도에서
And you can see this from the wall painting of Goguryeo and the flying horses painting in Shilla.
더 나아가서 제가 잠깐 뭐 재밌는 예를 든다면
If I may give you an interesting example,
중앙아시아 사람들이
the Central Asian people like gold, and that in Chinese character becomes Kim, gold. And it's the same character for the last family name Kim.
가만히 생각해 보니까 사마르칸트
And Samarkand or Tashkent, it all ends with Khan, Kent, which means village. So the capital of Shilla, which is Kumsong, could be seen similar to Kontan Ken. And Turkic people also say that this is the king of the east. So including the Korean Peninsula, in the past, the northern region played a key role in world history, and the expansion of Russia and the advent of Age of Discovery, their role faded away. But in the post-Soviet Union order, we're seeing the sovereign nations in Central Asia, which is creating new opportunities. And this has led to Korea engage in northern diplomacy. So we should try to find our roots and reconnect with the northern region. And I do think Taekwondo can play a key role here. There's many roles that culture can do, but Taekwondo's potentials are enormous. The function of Taekwondo is that it's a well-known sport, first of all, and it has already an established network. It's an Olympic sport, so there's a network that you can leverage to gather all these people as one. So Taekwondo can actually serve as a platform to connect all these people, to unite all these people, to build the solidarity in Eurasia. And Taekwondo could actually strengthen this solidarity, I hope. But to do that, we need to spread Taekwondo even more. It should be included in numerous northern region culture events. So they should go hand in hand, these culture events and Taekwondo. And just like Simbat or Mulan, like these content, if we can create animations or movies themed around Taekwondo, we can further promote Taekwondo in the northern region.
저기 그 알타이어 터키어하고
The
중앙아시아 말이 거의
Turkic language and the Central Asian language is pretty similar. So if we dub it in Turkish and add Russian subtitles, ranging from the east to Kyrgyzstan, 160 million people can enjoy this content. And the effect of content is enormous. I mean, if you think of Simbat or Mulan, you can associate where this setting is in real life. So we should create a visual content of Taekwondo, media content, and use that.
IT 시대인데
And we call this the era of IT.
장르로 만든
I think Taekwondo can be included as a genre of K-pop,
또 IT나 그 AI
and using various information technologies such as AI,
대중에게
we can further promote Taekwondo to the general public.
아닐까 싶습니다.
So these are some attempts that we can try. But the last and the best thing will be hosting contests, championship in different regions based on the National Olympic Association. So if we host a regional championship,
그 과정 속에서
the process itself of hosting the championship can give a message that the northern region is one. We can feel the solidarity, the unity. I hope. So if possible, we could even launch a secretariat or an organization that works on planning these championships. The reason why we need this is because after the Soviet Union fell, the Turkic States organization, the Turkic Summit, was established, and they became the organization of Turkic states in 2021. So they became OTS, and in Korea we have Korea Central Asia Cooperation Forum. It's Korea plus 5 Central Asian states, and Turkey is not part of that. And in OTS, Korea is not part of the OTS. And Korea is also part of the northern region, but that's not really being recognized. That's why we are left out of OTS. That's why there's this mismatch in the membership. That's probably because of the 500 years history of Joseon, because the Joseon dynasty denied the history of northern region as us being the descendants of the northern region. And because of the Great Game, there was a disconnection, and the subsequent Cold War further created disconnection. So we had a long disconnection between the northern region and Korea, making it feel as if we are two different players, two different actors, but that's not the case. That's something I want to emphasize today. So this Korea Central Asia Cooperation Forum and other forums can be leveraged for us to promote cooperation. But Taekwondo, in any case, could contribute in these meetings for us to culturally connect. And if we develop even further and maybe get a chance to include North Korea, then we can create new opportunities to cooperate culturally and even politically. And going even further, Canada is known as a country of immigrants. If there are a lot of northern region origin people living in Canada as immigrants, if they form a delegation from Canada and participate the Eurasian Taekwondo Championship, that can further expand the scope of our cooperation. So ultimately, what's important is that we create a platform where we can gather together and instill this idea that we are one. all cooperation begin with the idea that we are one, that sense of community. Thank you. We are running behind time. Thank you. So yes, with this, we will be able to cooperate and strengthen our cooperation. Thank you.
보니까 우리 말씀
Thank you very much. I know that you have a lot to offer, but due to time limit, I had to stop. But the two of you spent 40 minutes, so this means there is less time for the remaining panel members. I hope that you will go directly to the conclusion, because we are not at an academic seminar, so rather than talking about the basic background or the theoretical background, I hope that you will focus more on specific proposals and specific ideas rather than giving an overview. He talked about creating an animation using Taekwondo as a motive and some regional competitions of Taekwondo that can promote cooperation. So these are some concrete ideas that we would like to welcome. Now, I would like to ask Dr. Lee Hong-ki to be very brief on the current status, but rather spend more time on specific ideas, because we can refer to the proceedings for information. So please go ahead. Hello, everyone. I am Lee Yong-won from EHL Bio. CEO Lee Hong-ki was supposed to participate, but he had to go on an urgent business trip, so I am here on his behalf. I'd like to ask for your understanding, and I'd like to thank the organizers for this opportunity. I know that we're running short on time, so I'm going to go quickly. We know that there are major waves of K beauty and K-pop, K-music, but we are working in the K-medicine area and K-beauty and how we can increase more opportunities. Now, we are also dealing with K-quarantine in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. So our business is doing really well, and it is growing rapidly in the context of the COVID-19 pandemic and the K-beauty. Despite the pandemic, a lot of people are focusing on longevity and quality of life, and therefore the overseas market is expanding. And there is a big emphasis on well-being and happiness, and the tourism related to this is growing at the rate of 20 to 30% each year. And yes, Korean healthcare sector is very competitive. As you can see here, in terms of lifespan or quality of life, we are doing much better than the other countries. And it means that we have wonderful medical technology and healthcare capabilities. So we have wonderful competitive advantage, just like Korea has wonderful ICT industry, especially for medical tourism. Distance is also a key factor, and as you may know, Korea is located within 3 to 4 hours of flight of 60 cities. So there are many major cities surrounding Korea. And there is this vaccine for cancer that is gaining a lot of attention. And Korea is well situated to produce a cancer vaccine. And Korea has very large markets around the country or that is near. So that is a great opportunity for Korea. There are many news articles about K-medicine and K-bio, and the new government is also promoting the bio industry. And I expect that there will be a lot of support from the government as well. This is the current status and the future prospect of medical tourism. In the past, it was more about medical checkups and aesthetics, but now there's a more shift to regeneration medicine, regenerative medicine.
관광에 대한 것이 상당히 인프라가 잘 돼 있습니다.
We have wonderful medical tourism infrastructure where patients can get one-stop services for all kinds of medical services that they need. So there are great tour packages for people who come to Korea for medical services. And as for us, we have the language experts in 7 different countries to provide local services. So this has received good response. And you can see that medical tourists do not just come here for treatment and medical services, but also they spend money on various tourist attractions and they do shopping and many other things. Since 1991, we started as a comprehensive medical checkup facility, but now we also offer aesthetic and skincare services. And since 2011, we are doing research on stem cell research for regenerative treatment.
저희가 지금 주기세포에 대해서는
So regarding stem cell, you may have heard about stem cell, but you may not know very well about stem cells. And I may go on and on about stem cells and what they can do for us. But in short, when you are starting from the age of 20, your body will start aging and you will have a lot of stem cells. And when some parts of your body get weakened, they may suffer and they may lead to illnesses. But you can use stem cells to reverse the aging or treat the damaged organs and parts of your body. And that is what stem cell treatment is all about. So we've been doing stem cell research for a long time.
제가 잠깐 질문을
May I ask you a question?
의료 분야에서
So then, in the medical field, how can we promote cooperation with the northern countries? Can you talk about the plans? When you think about medical tourism, you may think about high-level, wealthier people who would come to Korea for medical services. And as for us, we have been operating in Southeast Asia for almost 10 years, and we were able to make contribution. And also, I know that there are a lot of people coming to Korea from the northern countries, including Kazakhstan. So they come to Korea, then they receive treatment, and then we also provide technology transfer. And to do so, we need local partners because medical services are more of a personal level, one-on-one services provided. So initially, we will invite patients to come to Korea, and then we will find a local partner and build a partnership. That's the second phase. And the final phase is technology transfer and licensing, and that's how we're going about it. And so you offer comprehensive healthcare checkups. We are trying to offer such, but now we're focused more on aesthetics and skincare, and now we're focused more on regenerative medicine using stem cell for cure and treatment. So as for health checkups, we are referring our patients to the healthcare or health checkup facilities. There's a lot of more details, so refer to the proceedings for your information. As for any specific plans, you can elaborate more on that. Yes, please refer to the proceeding, and we've been doing a lot in terms of beauty and skincare and aesthetics and plastic surgery and health checkup. So we've been appealing, and our services were quite popular in overseas markets. And we have one of the largest research facilities in Korea. We've got the CPC certification in Japan. And because of the pharmacy law, you can offer treatments only after your treatments pass the clinical trials. So we are going through clinical trials as well for some of the solutions. And we are going in that direction under the new law on advanced medicine. And last but not least,
이 주기세포 화장품 그러면 사람들이 주기세포
I'd like to talk about cosmetics products that include stem cells. But when you do stem cell, there's culture, byproduct of stem cell culture. And so this byproduct is included in these skincare products. And we prepared them for souvenir, but these are for exports. So for Vietnam and Cambodia, so the packaging may not be as sophisticated as you may expect, but the content, the substance is wonderful because it has byproduct of stem cell cultivation. So I hope that you will enjoy these skincare products. Thank you very much.
So we heard the keynote presentations from 3 speakers. Now we have 5 panelists. As I mentioned earlier, please keep short about the current status. Talk about concrete plans going forward, not a unilateral supply plan, but rather how will you achieve a two-way interaction? Please make sure to comment more around what I've just mentioned. So we'll start with Ms. Kang So-young. In the morning, I was given the chance to read the welcome speech, and now I was given the opportunity to join as a panelist. And I would like to propose 4 things when we say Taekwondo should be used as a medium for cultural connection. When I was young, when I was an elementary student, I watched Taekwondo, which was an animation. And when you think of Taekwondo, you can think of the sidekicks. And the sidekicks had its roots in Taekwondo. They are cultural content like this. And these days, webtoons, these web cartoons are really popular around the world. So Naver and Kakao are doing really well. They're the number 1 when it comes to webtoons. So Korea leads the world when it comes to creating online cartoons. And if Kakao actually created a webtoon on Taekwondo. And Naver came up with a romance webtoon that's also based on Taekwondo. So there are some webtoons on Taekwondo, and hopefully we see more of them, because webtoons are called OSM, which means one source. So drama, series, movies, they're becoming similar to tourist resources as one source. So Taekwondo themed content can be used in numerous ways. And the speaker next to me, we exchanged name cards as we sat down. And I learned that he works in the sports sector. So he said that he works in the sports legacy division and he focused on Taekwondo. And I looked into how Taekwondo is doing, and it's not an intangible asset yet listed in the UNESCO heritage. And I asked why it's not yet listed. It's because of karate. The roots of Taekwondo is partially in karate, is what some people are saying. So we need more forums like this to have Taekwondo listed as a World Heritage, and we need more research carried out in the roots of Taekwondo. And when I read this booklet, I learned about AI, Taekwondo demonstration, and also using holograms to demonstrate Taekwondo. I think these are all unique ideas that we can leverage to promote Taekwondo. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Kang, for your wonderful comments. Now, I would like to invite Professor Kang Jin-seok, Director of Foreign Language Training and Testing Center at HUBS. I enjoyed the 3 keynote presentations. I was inspired by the keynote presentations. Thank you. I'm not going to talk specifically about Taekwondo itself, but I'd like to talk about the implications and meaning of Hallyu, or the Korean culture. Today, we're discussing culture strategies for the Korean Peninsula and the North. In this regard, I think that we need to discuss the value of Taekwondo as our traditional culture. Taekwondo has its roots in Korean traditional culture, and it has evolved as modern martial arts and a competitive sport, so we were able to see the evolution. And Taekwondo is different from karate or kung fu. There are other martial arts in other countries, but Taekwondo was able to survive all these competition coming from other forms of martial arts. So all in all, I think that Taekwondo bears a lot of significance for Korea and the Korean culture. I like to argue that Taekwondo has gone beyond the realms of karate or kung fu. It has gained global recognition and status. Also, as was mentioned by Director General Seo Jung-gang of World Taekwondo, Taekwondo is also promoting value, universal value for the global community. So in that sense, I can see that Taekwondo is very important. It is unique as traditional martial arts for Korea, but it has evolved as modern sport, and it has provided a model of challenge, the spirit of challenge and development. So I thought that Taekwondo can be further promoted. The fact that Taekwondo has its own originality is something we can use for storytelling, but at the same time, it has been evolving as a modern sport, and so this is quite inspiring, and it also provides the challenging opportunities for athletes and those who practice Taekwondo. When you look at movies and dramas these days, Korean dramas and Korean movies are loved by global audiences, and in that sense, Taekwondo is following a similar trend. Then we can apply this to the northern countries. We can combine the storytelling capabilities of Korea and the stories told in the northern region. We can combine these stories, these narratives, and we can create something new out of these stories that we can tell based on Taekwondo, and we can open up a new area. There is Japanese content and Hollywood content, but the Taekwondo content and Korean content is rather distinct and different from the Japanese or Hollywood culture or content. So now we can contribute to developing cultures of northern region by utilizing our own strength. Thank you.
우리 강 교수님 말씀 중에서
As Professor Kang mentioned, he actually made an important comment.
한류 또는 태권도라고
The
하는 게
K-wave Taekwondo has its uniqueness, and
타문화권과
we should be able to leverage this uniqueness, integrate it with other cultures to make it more universal.
저희가 가장 한국적인 것이
The most Korean
늘 이야기를 하지만
thing could become the most universal thing, but at the same time, the phrase that it's the most Korean thing might sound as if it just belongs to us. So it may not really work well when we're trying to interact with other cultures. We need to think how we can make our culture to be welcomed in other regions. Thank you for your comment.
이제 이어서 우리 박정웅
Next, I would like to ask Mr. Park Jung-un, the director of Jeollabuk-do Office of Korea Tourism Organization, to give his comments. He traveled all the way from Jeollabuk-do. I will keep it short. I really enjoyed listening to the 3 presentations, and the presentations talked about using Taekwondo in the process of cooperating with the northern region. I completely agree. While I was coming up to Seoul, I received a call from the consul in Montreal. I heard that there's not much people-to-people exchanges in Montreal. How should we do that in a healthy manner? He asked me this question. I said, you should use the Taekwondo network locally. So try to use that network to engage in further cooperation and exchanges. So looking for the cultural contacts and searching for solidarity with the northern region, I think there are a few things that we need to consider in terms of policy. So I'd like to make some recommendations. First, in the morning session, as former Secretary General Pan Ki-moon mentioned, when we're trying to engage in cultural exchanges, inclusivity and acceptance is the first and foremost requirement. We need to be able to understand differences, and the most successful case of this would be Taekwondo. Taekwondo did not just remain as a unique culture of Korea. It's not just Korean anymore. As we heard from the presentation earlier, we can see it in the Olympics as a martial art. It began as a martial art, but it became a global sport, and as well as art, performing arts. So that's why the identity of Taekwondo remained. At the same time, it created more value. So to that extent, in the CIS region or Central Asia, when we try to bring Taekwondo in that region, we should consider the characteristics of these regions. These regions were under the rule of the former Soviet Union. It's been 30 years since they've been independent, but we still see remnants of Russia in these regions. So when we try to engage in cultural exchanges, when we try to bring Korean culture to this region, is that the basis of our culture roots from capitalism, and we need to make sure that we have a paradigm shift in our thinking process. And we need to know what kind of strength these people in the regions have. For instance, Mongolia, in their minds, they still have this perception that once in the past they have ruled the world. They're really proud of that. And when Koreans visit Mongolia, they only look at the current economy. They only look at the current economic power. And sometimes they think that Mongolians are inferior than us, which leads to conflicts. So we need to make sure that we don't have this superior perception and move away from this unilateral way of communication. And when we engage in cultural exchanges, we need to clearly define the boundary of culture. When we say culture, we usually conjure up the image of traditional culture. But if you see the culture of today's Korea or the world, for sure, traditional culture is important, but the pop culture, such as K-pop, K-drama, all of these things that make up the K-wave should be at the forefront when we engage in cultural exchanges. And you mentioned that I should focus on the practical points, but when I used to work in the Middle East about 10 years ago, when it comes to exporting cultural content such as K-pop or K-drama, I mean, back then, K-drama was much more popular than K-pop. And the difference between Japanese drama and Korean drama was that Japanese regarded the drama as soft power. They provided it for free. But in Korea, we did not have that aid. We did not get that financial support to further spread our K-drama. So the assistance is there, but we need to make sure that the IP, such as K-drama and K-pop, should raise funds so that we can provide these content for free to these regions in Central Asia. And when it comes to cultural strategies, we should not approach cultural expansion just from a for-profit perspective. Japanese always focused on soft power. That's why they spread their culture around the world. And there are a lot of discussions around the move that Japanese took years ago. So when it comes to K-wave, the pop culture of Korea, we should make it so that this is not something that we should approach from an economic perspective, but for something that is something that from a social contribution perspective. Culture should be used as a means to promote mutual growth, mutual development, and that perception should come first when we engage in culture exchanges. And I would like to make 3 recommendations when it comes to policy. There are a lot of developing countries in the Central Asian region. So we don't have many offices on site. We do have the Culture House of Korea. However, aside from China, Russia, and Kazakhstan, we don't have offices or people who are responsible to carry out these cultural strategies. For sure, our embassies and consulates do this, but they can't do this in a systematic way because we don't have a dedicated organization to do this. And we also need to do cultural ODA. We talked about ODA in the previous roundtable, but we need to expand this culture ODA. Personally, when I was in Mongolia, I carried out the hardware ODA for the first time. But culture ODA is only being done at the scale of culture partnership program. That's the only project that the government is implementing now. So we should expand culture ODA with private organizations and foundations. We should provide more financial support to these private foundations. And also for students studying abroad in Korea and foreign workers, we should assist these people as well. Lastly, when it comes to tourism, we need to promote people-to-people exchanges. To do that, for people living in northern regions to visit Korea, they need to get a visa. So we need to improve the current policy so that people can more easily visit Korea. And we talked about medicine tourism, but the biggest barrier to medicine tourism is visa once again. So we need to revamp the policy so that it's easier to travel back and forth. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Park, for your remarks. Next, I would like to invite Professor Son Young-hoon of HUBS, and he's director of the Institute for Central Asian Studies. Hello, everyone. My name is Son Young-hoon, a professor at HUBS. I am specialized in Central Asia, and as I listened to the 3 keynote presentations, I was able to learn a lot, especially about the current status of cultural exchanges between Korea and Central Asia, and there's a lot more that we need to do in the future. So I'd like to thank the 3 keynote presenters for teaching me all these important points. The moderator has been very strict in terms of time management. I have a lot that I'd like to discuss with you, but I'm going to try my best to be brief so that I can focus more on specific ways to promote cultural cooperation with Central Asia. And that is going to be the main gist of my comments. As many people mentioned, there have been many cultural exchanges and cooperation between Korea and Central Asia for the past 3 decades, so it has been remarkable indeed. Nevertheless, many cultural exchanges were one-off events, and in many cases, there were only one-directional exchange. And furthermore, because of the prolonged pandemic situation, many people-to-people exchanges and cultural exchanges were delayed or disrupted. Therefore, it is time for us to think about the ways to restore cultural exchanges between Korea and Central Asia as we're going out of the pandemic. I remember it was about 2016, and there was a survey on the people of Central Asia, on their understanding of Korea. So when you look at the result of the survey, more than 70% of the people in Central Asia are aware of Korea, and they want to know more about Korea. And they would like to participate in cultural events hosted by Korea or about Korea. So I remember the results of the survey back in 2016. And this really shows that there is a lot of reason for us to promote cultural cooperation between Korea and Central Asia. So specifically, there are 4 main points that I want to make, but I think I need to only be able to cover 2 points. As Ambassador Chung Tae-in mentioned, we need to look at our history and culture, and I believe that Koreans are most closely related to Central Asia in terms of our history and culture. So I hope that there will be more academic and scholarly exchanges between Korea and Central Asia. There were cultural exchanges along the Silk Road in our past history, and we can revisit them. And we have many historical and cultural assets and historical facts that demonstrate the close ties between Korea and Central Asia. These will remind us of how closely related we are. And based on that kind of recognition, we can build and develop cooperation based on this shared understanding and recognition. And secondly, we need to remember that people are the key actors in promoting cultural exchanges. And so I hope that we can build the human network of Korea and Central Asia. For the past 30 years, there has been a big growth in terms of the quantity of exchanges between Korea and Central Asia, but we need to expand this furthermore. I know that there have been numerous people coming to Korea from Central Asia as students or as trainees and as exchange scholars, but we need to utilize them. We need to build a effective human network so that we can continue to foster the relationships that we forge with people from Central Asia. And they can serve as bridges, and they can serve as key actors in promoting cooperation. And their input can be reflected in developing ideas for cooperation. And their contributions will help improve the images of Central Asia and Korea. As was mentioned previously, you may refer to the report published by the Northern Economic Council, and Mr. Park Jung-won mentioned this already. In order to promote the scope of exchanges between Korea and Central Asia, we need to have an integrated cultural platform. It could be in the form of Korea Center, but in Kazakhstan we have the Korean Cultural Center already. But this culture center of Korea is only focused on education, but there are other areas such as tourism and medicine and taekwondo. So we need more coherence and integration in building this platform that will facilitate cultural cooperation. So having this, we need to put in place a good platform that will serve as a basis for further collaboration and cultural exchanges going forward. So with that, I'd like to wrap up my intervention. Oh, you can have some more time. Okay, then I'd like to add some more. I am a historian. I study history. Now, I know that Hallyu, or Korean culture, is quite popular in Central Asia. It may be about K-pop or Korean dramas, but they have shown Korean lifestyle, and in doing so, some may have some anti-sentiment against Korea in some Central Asian countries. But it is not just about fashion or lifestyle of Koreans showcased in Korean dramas, but there are many aspects of Korean culture that we need to promote as well. So we can produce documentaries or films or dramas that cover a wide variety of topics. And in developing such cultural content, we can work together with Central Asian countries so that their philosophy, their ideas can be incorporated in such cultural content. Thank you.
감사합니다.
Thank you.
제가 시간을 좀 많이 재촉을
I know I rushed all of you speakers, but thanks to you keeping the time, we would have some time left after Ms. Oh Jin-suk gives the comments. So I'll give an opportunity to all of our speakers and panelists, maybe use a minute to make extra comments. And Ms. Oh Jin-suk came from the Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism. And the Northern Region cooperation was led by the private sector, but we need to do this with the help of the government and the ministry. So if the private companies or other organizations have something to request to the ministry and the government, please use this opportunity to make your requests, to ask for support when you engage in exchanges and cooperation with the northern region. And once Ms. Oh Jin-suk ends her comments, we can go back, and Mr. Park, you can start with your comment, because you probably know what our businesses feel like. So you probably know what the ministry can do to actually help our businesses overseas. Hello, everyone. I am Oh Jin-suk. I'm from the Sports Legacy Division from the Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism. I really enjoyed listening to the presentations and the comments from our panelists. I would like to share what the government is doing to further promote Taekwondo around the world. And I will try to provide answers and talk about what we're doing from the government level. If you cannot pull up the slides, I will start with my comments without the slides. What we try to do is promote Taekwondo, and we do have a law that stipulates that Taekwondo is our national sport. This law was legislated in 2018. Our national flag, our national flower, Taekwondo is regarded as a national sport. So it's become a very important factor that represents Korea. That's stipulated in the law, and we saw what World Taekwondo does earlier. Taekwondo is an Olympic sport, so I know that World Taekwondo is playing a big role to promote Taekwondo, and the government is making sure that we support these initiatives. If I may share the successes that we've made overseas when it comes to Taekwondo projects, as of 2022, 56 countries around the world, we have offices that support Taekwondo. And we offer support for Taekwondo trainings. About 220,000 people are getting these trainings around the world. And for countries that are not that familiar with Taekwondo, we invite people to Korea to provide them further trainings on Taekwondo. And we also provide support for Taekwondo-related gears and equipment. And the World Taekwondo Demonstration Team is acting globally, and the National Taekwondo Association is also performing Taekwondo around the world. Due to budget constraints, they were supposed to perform in more countries, but right now they're doing it in 13 countries. In Uzbekistan, Ukraine, Georgia, we have workers dispatched specifically to handle Taekwondo-related issues. And we have classes dedicated for Taekwondo. We use the foreign embassies and consulates to see how much demand there is. And in Central Asia, I don't think there is much application to get this Taekwondo training. Some countries like Brazil, East Timor, Portugal, Guatemala, Latvia, Honduras have official classes that teach Taekwondo, but that's not the case yet in Central Asia. And the dispatch of World Taekwondo Demonstration Team is marking its 30th and is dispatched to Kyrgyzstan, and we're going to celebrate the 30th anniversary of our relations in those regions. And there's something we do with the foreign ministry as well. Around the world, we have 195 embassies and consulates around the world, and we have contests that's being held by our overseas embassies, and the winner is invited to Korea, and this event is very popular. So we do think that this is a really important project. The foreign ministry thinks that it's important as well. And as all of you mentioned, we need to create more content using Taekwondo. The content promotion agency is doing various things. They're trying to create web novels, webtoons using Taekwondo. I guess there are limits for us to actually create the content, but the gaming companies or other private companies were providing financial support. It's not that much. We have budget constraints, but we are providing financial support. And of them, there's some content that got a lot of views, and we have chosen those content to make sure that it can be spread around the world. So that's a project that we're working on right now. And to help you understand more about Taekwondo in the Ministry of Sports, Culture, Sports and Tourism, we have Taekwondo Promotion Agency. We dispatch Peace Corps, we support Taekwondo gears in this agency, and we have a corporation which perform Taekwondo. We also have Taekwondo associations which host a national contest in Korea. And World Taekwondo is recognized by the Olympics, so it's playing an important role in IOC. And there are some countries that have designated the Day of Taekwondo. California, Maryland, Baltimore City, and other cities and states have designated the Day of Taekwondo, and they're asking us to send the Taekwondo demonstration teams. So we're seeing a lot of demands. So we're trying to meet those demands as much as we can, and we're trying to allocate budgets effectively as possible. And in today's forum, we talked a lot about the northern region. And it's true that we lack support in the Central Asian region, but based on what I've heard today, based on what I heard from the keynote speech from former Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, I think we do need to come up with practical ways for cooperations. And based on what I heard today, I would like to comment on the UNESCO heritage. I think there was some miscommunication earlier. In 2016, the Taekwondo contest in Jeonbuk region was listed as the World UNESCO heritage, but to list Taekwondo as a whole to UNESCO heritage, it's not that easy. So we are in the process of doing it. We are talking with relevant associations. Our ministry and the Culture Foundation and the government is currently in discussion, and we are still in the preparatory stage. And once the time is right, the government will provide more active support so that Taekwondo is listed as a World Intangible Heritage of UNESCO. And we are hopeful that it will become listed. And as you mentioned, many of you said that it has a lot of value. And government also regards that Taekwondo can play a key role in K-culture. And as an Olympic sport, it plays a role as a sport, but it can also play a role as a cultural element. So we're trying to spread Taekwondo around the world as sport and as culture. We are actually working in this direction at our ministry. And we talked about cultural platforms and cultural house. That's beyond the scope of my work, actually the scope of our division. But a lot of people in our ministry is interested in this area. So if you give more ideas, I'll make sure this idea is relayed in the relevant division or team, and even report this to our minister and vice minister. Thank you.
감사합니다.
Thank you very much, Director O. Now, I wonder if Mr. Park from Jeonlabuk-do office may have a few words to say. But first, I'd like to invite Mr. Professor Kang Jin-seok. Thank you for your intervention. So I don't have much to add. But at Hankuk University of Foreign Studies, we have the Foreign Language Training and Testing Center, and we provide excellent language training. So if you would like to go abroad to promote Taekwondo or to promote K-medicine, you can come to us to learn the language that you need to practice, you need to improve. So make sure, don't forget our training center. Thank you.
And Professor Son? I talked about establishing Korean centers. In this context, I would like to add that this cultural house, this cultural Korean house, can actually become another unilateral effort. So at the end of the day, what's important is two-way communication, two-way interaction, whether it's Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan. I was not able to attend the morning session. I saw the session on YouTube, and I heard some of the ambassadors say that we should build a Korean culture house in Uzbekistan and their culture house in Korea.
그에 상응하는 그러한 문화적인 어떤
And
통로들
I guess that means that we need to create channels where we can communicate and exchange in the field of culture.
소장님이 사실 중요한 말씀
Professor Son just pointed out a very important element.
말로는 쌍방향으로
We
해야
always
된다고
say we have to engage in two-way interaction. We say this, but in real life, it turns out to be we are the supplier of culture. So it's not easy to engage in this two-way interaction. So that means we need to create a system that allows us to engage in this two-way interaction. When we pursue cultural exchanges with the northern region, we need to make sure that their culture is accepted by us as well. But due to the economic reality of the Central Asian countries, it's not easy, and that applies to the ASEAN nation as well. We have Korea ASEAN Center, and in Busan we have the ASEAN Culture Institute, and the ASEAN nations are supposed to be promoted by Korea, but it's not easy to do so because they don't have that financial power. So we should support these ASEAN nations. We should come up with a platform ourselves so that these ASEAN nations and other nations can spread their culture. So we need to create a law so that these other Asian countries in the region, despite their economic status, can actually introduce their culture to us. So we need to spend our own money, maybe create a small international organization so that we can empower these other Asian countries to spread their Asian culture and promote their culture in Korea. So we do have an ASEAN Institute, as I mentioned earlier, in Busan, but for northern region countries as well, we need to have a mechanism that allows these northern countries to promote their culture in Korea. So maybe a culture house could be an example. But I believe that if money is the issue, Korea should provide this financial support.
Next, I would like to invite Ambassador Chang Tae-in for additional intervention. It just came to my mind that there's something called MICTA, Mexico, Indonesia, Korea, Turkey, and Australia. These 5 countries, the middle power countries, they comprise MICTA. And these countries are hosting various events around the world. And this concept can be applied to the northern countries, in my mind. For instance, we have in Seoul embassies, and in Uzbekistan, there may also be a venue for gathering of northern countries and Korea. Somebody talked about a platform. Likewise, I hope that we can have something in place to facilitate such cooperation. Thank you. Next, Mr. Seo.
First off, it's very exciting to have this panel session on Taekwondo, and not just focusing on the Central Asian region, but also in other regions. If the ministry and the government provides more support, that will be helpful. And I would like to make a request on that end. From our perspective, we think that you need to change the paradigm of what constitutes support. 1970s, 80s, we were the donor. We were in the donor position. But I think that perception is still used today. You know, around the world, we're seeing a lot of 9-dan Taekwondo athletes. They're actually sending their Taekwondo coaches to other countries. So So
한 단계 높은 관점에서
we need to have a paradigm shift in what we can do,
또 사정에 맞게
and we need to approach countries case by case
결국은
when we are providing support.
한국이 아니고
And when it comes to preserving Taekwondo, it's not the role of Korea to do this alone. It's the work of all nations around the world that practice Korea. If Taekwondo was to be removed from the Olympic sports, a lot of countries will go against this. That's how popular Taekwondo is around the world. So us trying to protect Taekwondo as our own sport will not be helpful. We have the International Association for Taekwondo, the World Taekwondo.
을 또 지원을 해줌으로써
So by supporting World Taekwondo,
장기적으로는 훨씬 도움이
it will be more helpful in the long term for us to promote Taekwondo around the world. So please have this in mind when you create policies.
감사합니다.
Thank you very much.
EHL 바이오의
Now, I'd like to invite Mr. Lee from EHL. We've been talking about Taekwondo, so I don't know if it will be appropriate to talk about medical tourism all of a sudden, but as Mr. Park mentioned, when it comes to medical tourism, visa issues are quite troublesome, especially for people coming from the northern countries. There's a strict evaluation in the visa process, but medical tourism can provide a lot of value, and there's a lot of a positive outlook for medical tourism. So if there is support from the government with respect to visa, it will be very helpful. So I don't see any participants from the foreign ministry, but I hope that this will be taken into account. Thank you.
감사합니다. 혹시 우리 오 과장님 더
Does Ms. O have any other comments to make? I did not get a chance to say thank you because we have a roundtable on Taekwondo, and as Mr. Seo mentioned, we should change the mindset of not being the mother country of Taekwondo, but a country that also loves Taekwondo. So we are trying to change our stance internally as well. And as I have worked in the ministry, I was able to witness how a lot of people around the world enjoyed and loved Taekwondo. And when I see these official reports coming in from countries around the world, I know that we do have some shortcomings. So I will keep in mind on what you commented today, and we will try to come up with more detailed, specific measures for the northern regions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, finally, Ms. Kang So-young. I made some recommendations, but one was missing. It was about making Taekwondo as dance content. So this was one of the recommendations. And so I think the better expression is using Taekwondo as performing art. Because as you saw in the demonstration, the performance at America's Got Talent, it was not Taekwondo, authentic Taekwondo, but it was performing art version of Taekwondo. So I hope that this will be spread even more. And about listing of Taekwondo on the UNESCO heritage, because we have Shirum, a traditional wrestling, as listed already. I hope that Taekwondo will be listed very soon. Thank you.
그 질문 하나만 우리 서국장님께
I would like to ask a question to Mr. Seo.
태권도는 이미 정착 쌍방향
Actually, Taekwondo is well settled in a lot of countries around the world as a culture, and it's an official sport in Olympics. And if it was to be removed, other countries would stand behind us and go against this decision. That's really nice to hear. But aside from Taekwondo, for instance, medical exchanges or other culture exchanges, it's the same culture, but it's different.
어떤 것을 살려서
What can we do to emphasize the aspects of Taekwondo so that we can use Taekwondo as a means for cooperation? For instance, tourism, medicine, and excavating ancient cultural artifacts. I talked about various different cultural elements just now.
교류의 성공
But
사례를
when we see the success of Taekwondo exchanges, I want to know what the secret is. What is the secret behind Taekwondo's success so that we can use that secret and apply it to other culture exchanges? One thing that I can think of is when I used to work in the Korean consulate in the United States, I saw that a lot of Americans practice and train Taekwondo in Berkeley University,
60개 미국 내 대학들이
as well as about 100 in Berkeley University, about 160 universities gathered together to hold a Taekwondo contest.
그렇게 제가 그 미국 부모들이 와서
And I asked the American parents, why did you teach your child Taekwondo? And the first thing they say when they answer is, after they learned Taekwondo, they changed in their attitude. They became very considerate. They cared about other family members. And I realized Taekwondo is a sport that can build character. It allows you to be considerate of others. So American parents are sending their children to these Taekwondo academies to build better character and be more
타 분야의
considerate of others. So when we engage in culture exchanges with other regions, like the northern regions, we should have our manners. We should be considerate. So what do you think in your what is your opinion and what the secret is behind Taekwondo's success? I'm not sure if I have enough insight to give that answer, but there was a slide that I skipped in my presentation, which was on the development and support of Taekwondo, and it approaches the development support from two ways. One is Taekwondo as a means and Taekwondo as a purpose. When we say Taekwondo as a purpose, we're trying to increase the number of people who practice Taekwondo and strengthening the capacity of world Taekwondo. That's one aspect. And another one is Taekwondo as a means, which is the refugee program. When we teach Taekwondo to refugees, we're not trying to increase the population of Taekwondo practitioners. We're trying to serve the vulnerable people, the refugees. And if we run these programs, these refugees tend to have relatively more available time, and they can enjoy Taekwondo, but Taekwondo cannot fulfill everything. There are other things that we can provide, such as medical support. So if we can have this program that includes other aspects, not just Taekwondo, to these refugees, it will be great. So when Taekwondo is promoted as a purpose, that's not an issue, but when Taekwondo becomes a means, we should cooperate with other disciplines in order to maximize the effect.
감사합니다.
Thank you.
지금 국장님 말씀을 드리면서
As I was listening to Mr.
많이들 모르겠어요. 태권도는
Saw from World Taekwondo, I do not think that Taekwondo aims to be a commercial business, for-profit business. Sometimes when we promote cultural exchanges, we may at the same time pursue some sort of monetary profit, but then it may end up being a business. So this is something that we need to be mindful of and try to avoid. Now, I'd like to ask if there's any panel member for final comments. As I was listening to all these comments, it came to my mind that unilateralism in cultural promotion and two-way exchanges, when tourism is promoted, there will be more people-to-people exchanges and mutual visits. In that sense, I hope that there will be more tourist interactions or exchanges between Korea and Central Asia. And in that regard, I hope that there will be improvement in terms of visa process. And also in this regard, the Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism or World Taekwondo, I'd like to make some proposal. If you use Taekwondo as part of tourism promotion, I'm working at Jeonbuk Jeollabuk-do office, and we work with World Taekwondo branches. And these demonstration teams, when it comes to their budget and their operational costs, they have some difficulties. Of course, we are trying our best, but I hope that more demonstration teams can go around the world because these demonstration teams are very influential and they are quite impactful. Last year, we went to Taiwan using Taekwondo as a marketing tool, and what was missing there was that we know the network of Taekwondo masters in Taiwan, but we may not have full access to their addresses and their contact information of these Taekwondo masters located in Taiwan. As you may know, there are some factions within Taekwondo, so we were not able to have a holistic list of Taekwondo masters in Taiwan, but we were not able to get that. So marketing was not as effective as what we planned. So this is something that I wanted to add. Thank you.
네, 감사합니다. 제가 한
Thank you.
3분에
In 3 minutes, I will give my concluding remarks and end this session.
전에 나왔던 이 제1차 회의 때
During the first forum last year,
어제 잠시 읽어봤어요.
I got the chance to read the booklet that was published last year, and I found an interesting line. The people around the world know K-pop, but they don't know Korea. That I found that line really interesting.
중국 사람들 관광객들을 보면은
It's the same thing when it goes to the Chinese tourists. They know the names of the Korean celebrities, but when these Chinese tourists come to Korea, they seem to know nothing and they don't seem to care about the Korean history. They don't go to historical sites. And they only have this Chinese mindset thinking that Korea used to be part of China once. So when it comes to our cooperation and relations with the northern region, Taekwondo is for sure important, and we'll have to expand our field of cooperation in terms of culture into other areas. But I think it boils down to language and history, and the academic circle and by the government, we should pay more attention in promoting our history and language. Our National Language Institute promotes the Korean language around the world.
문화 교류하고
So
그 사람들의 의식을 갖다 바꾸는 거예요.
the cultural promotion that we do and the actual effect that it has should match, because we need to promote the language and history of Korea in order for us to actually understand one another in terms of culture.
포인트가 하나
And the booklet published in the last forum, it also said that the general public should also engage
온라인을
in
어택트 방식의
this discussion and exchanges. Nowadays, we have a lot of online means of
먹방 크리에이터
cooperation. We have foodies who create YouTube content. These influencers who show how to make kimchi, these content are really popular
그러면서
overseas.
숫자들이 뭐
And these influencers have a lot of subscribers, few thousand to hundreds of thousands of people.
결론적으로 지금 회의를 잠시 마치기 전에
So before I conclude the session, I would like to summarize what we heard today, both during the morning session and in the afternoon session. One thing was that the cultural cooperation should be done in a two-way manner, and it should be sustainable. And Korea should be having this stance of inclusivity. There were criticisms around the fact that we were not that inclusive of other cultures, and we should come up with practical means to be inclusive of other cultures. That was mentioned by former Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. And we also need to pursue universal value, which should be done through cultural exchanges. With that, I would like to conclude today's session. We talked a lot about Taekwondo, and I think it's thanks to the success of Taekwondo, which allows us to wonder how Taekwondo was so successful. We should analyze this even further. Maybe in the forum next year, we should focus more on how this was successful. Just listening to a success story is not enough for us to apply this in other fields. So since we have a best practice, we should analyze this even more. I would like to thank all the presenters, our panelists, for being here with us for such a long time. Let's congratulate this ending of the session. Thank you.